So I just got a notification from the folks at Facebook, which tells me, it says, you joined Facebook 8 years ago today. Really, I hadn't been counting. Those of you who are of a certain generation, I'm right on that cusp. We got computers in my school 2 years after I left. In fact, just a couple of years before I left, we got electric typewriters instead of the old, the Royals, and there were a lot of old versions around that we were typing on, F F F space G G G space, the way they taught you to type back in those days. And now everyone in their homes has these computers, or just about everyone, so kids don't even learn to type in the old-fashioned way. They all learn to type in their own style, in their own fashion. They're quick about it, but it's none of that old repetition that we did when we were younger, at least not the repetition in the same way. So I was not what you'd call from that technical generation. And then it was 8 years ago, I got an invitation from my daughter to join Facebook, and I signed up. And again, being somewhat of a novice at this sort of stuff. And for the first 10 months, she was my only Facebook friend. Because I didn't look at it, I didn't try to add anyone. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, people started popping up from high school and college and then past work experiences. And then all of a sudden, people who were listening to my radio show started popping up. And then, of course, I started getting in trouble because of things that I posted. I'd go into work and be told, well, you said this on Facebook last night. Well, it's my own dang page. Yes, but it reflects poorly on you as a talk show host to have an opinion. So here I am in Idaho because of that today, which I'm very happy about. I should point that out. Sometimes, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And so here we go. This morning, we'll be talking, in fact, he's got a schedule sometimes that doesn't really match ours. Congressman Raul Labrador, some days is scheduled to be with us, but at the last minute he gets summoned to the floor for a vote. But I do believe today he's going to be with us in just a few minutes. In about 6 or 7 minutes, he'll join us on the air. He's talking about something called the FADA, First Amendment Defense Act. First Amendment Defense Act, FADA, which would protect people who are preachers or bakers or shopkeepers, wedding photographers from participating in matrimonials that they may not approve of getting involved with. So that's on the way in a few minutes. Also, Jeremy Daly, who's a physician assistant, is going to be here from Tripp Family Medicine. They have been swamped this week with people who are suffering from allergies. Why? Well, just look around outdoors. All of a sudden, everything goes poof, and there's pollen in the air everywhere. So Jeremy's joining us at 8:30 this morning. And I believe we have a guest coming by. I don't have my actual rotation to know who it is, but I think that we've got someone coming by from City Hall in Twin Falls, and will be joining us just about 9:05 this morning, and we'll spend a few minutes just talking about some of the latest developments. I was downtown the other day. I was at the Idaho Thrift Shop. Stopped in there to get a couple of old shelves for books and things like that around the house. And they've already started a lot of the work in the area for the project. That is the new City Hall. So we've got a lot to talk about coming up. And if you were up late last night, I'm sure that if you're listening to this program, you were up late because you were watching the returns from the New York State primary, which was last night. And just before I went to bed, I texted my sister and I said, I think Donald Trump will win about 65% of our home county, where she still lives. And she texted back and she said, are you kidding? I think he wins 90. Now, Trump's record so far, his highest total, has been just under 70%. That was in a county in Virginia some weeks ago. His lowest total, Madison County, Idaho. That was after the Republican primary in March, I believe March 8th here in Idaho. He did not fare well here. It was Ted Cruz territory. And in Madison County, Idaho, Donald Trump is the least popular of all those Republicans who are still left running. Turns out my home county, he only got like 54% of the vote, but it really didn't matter because in several of the neighboring counties, he just racked up huge totals. The only county he lost, New York has 62 counties. He lost Manhattan Island. He won 61 other counties, 61 of 62, which is impressive. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, she had a margin of victory of about 15 points over the socialist Bernie Sanders. You got to introduce him that way. It's not just Bernie Sanders, the socialist Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton's margin of victory, 15 percentage points. But get this. I looked at that electoral map this morning, and she won all of the urban areas. She won Rochester, Buffalo, New York, Albany, New York, Binghamton, New York, Syracuse, New York, and then the general New York City area. Bernie Sanders won everything else. This reminds me of when I was a young guy and I was first voting back in the 1980s. and I was in college, and we had an election for governor in New York, and there was a very well-known businessman named Lou Lehrman running against an upstart named Mario Cuomo. Cuomo ended up winning the election, even though he only won the boroughs of New York City, where, of course, millions of people live, and the general area around the state capitol in Albany. He lost everything else. Geographically, Lou Lehrman owned the map. But the problem is, in those other counties, about 55 of those counties around the state, the cattle can't vote. So because of that, Cuomo became the governor. And so Hillary Clinton last night ends up winning this primary as well over Bernie Sanders, even though geographically the map shows Bernie Sanders mopping up. But she took the population centers where she had a heavy minority vote. They have been in the Clintons' back pocket now for, 25 years. So those people still came out, and they still turned around, and they voted for her. Sanders went home after his loss, licking his wounds now, his 15 percentage point loss, and he's back in his home state of Vermont.
I have not been here for a number of weeks, and I miss Vermont, and we need to get recharged and take a day off. I congratulate Secretary Clinton on her victory. Next week, we will be competing in Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, and Delaware, and we look forward to winning a number of those states. We think we have a very, very strong grassroots movement that's going to be knocking on a lot of doors and making a lot of telephone calls. At the end of the day, I've always believed that it is grassroots activism that wins elections, and I think you're going to see that in place next week.
Now, about the only hope he has left is an indictment for Hillary, which is not impossible, but I'll tell you what, might be a bit of a stretch. Raul Labrador, scheduled to join us in just a few minutes, representative from northern Idaho and parts of central Idaho too as well. He'll be speaking with us this morning about the First Amendment Defense Act, which many people think is obviously necessary to protect Christians who feel that they are being forced to comply with various wedding ceremonies that they just simply can't abide by because of their biblical teachings. Details on the way in just a few minutes. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're joined generally about, once a month by Congressman Raul Labrador, who represents, of course, half of Idaho in the U.S. House of Representatives, and he takes a few minutes to chat with us about some pending legislation or some of the top issues of the day, and today will be no different. You're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Top Story with Bill Colley this morning. And Congressman, first of all, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much. It's great to be on your show, Bill.
Last week, I read the Daily Signal every day, and last week I caught it. I would say that it's a newspaper or online newspaper. It seems to be dedicated to reporting on you and Jim Jordan. And it was a story.
No, not quite, but
a lot of discussion about the activities that the two of you are involved with, and we've got a lot of chatter in the country right now about these laws, or at least pending laws in various states, some of them in the South and Midwest, where they are trying to offer defenses for clergymen and perhaps even bakers and wedding photographers who might have objections to participating in same-sex weddings and could face serious punishment if they don't do it. You have been behind, at least for a year now, a bill called the First Amendment Defense Act, and it's gaining some strength as far as co-sponsors in the House, correct?
It is. We have 166 co-sponsors.
So you're moving forward, and you could potentially get this to a vote. You got to get it to committee, though, first, right?
We do, and the great thing about that article, actually, the Daily Signal article, is that it precipitated a bunch of phone calls to the committee and to people that are in charge of making these things move, and I think it was quite effective in kind of waking people up. So now we're hearing that we're going to have a committee hearing here pretty soon. They're going to try to get it through the committee, and then I think we should easily get it through the House floor. Obviously, it's going to have a little bit more difficulty in the Senate, but we're going to have a debate on this issue. And I want to clarify one point. You know, you mentioned the bakers and the florists and stuff. My bill is even more narrow than that. What my bill says specifically is that if you're an individual or an institution that still believes in traditional marriage, the federal government should not discriminate against you by taking away your tax-exempt status. So, for example, if you're a church school like BYU, and you decide, and BYU continues to preach traditional values, They can't take away the tax-exempt status of the school, number one, but also they can't take away the ability for church members to contribute to BYU and to similar religious institutions. So we're just trying to protect the individual from punishment by the federal government for believing in a particular belief system.
I know
It
you've had some constituents as well in northern Idaho who've had to deal with this issue, if I recall, from the last couple of years.
correct, but they're dealing under a different statute. So their city ordinance says that there should be protections for gays and lesbians, and so the fight that they're having is more of a local fight, and I think that's a fight that needs to be had at the state level. Cities and counties and states need to realize that the moment that you extend protections to a certain group of people, that means that another group of people are not going to be able to make decisions in their private sphere and in their businesses. And that's something that, for example, the whole argument that we've had in Idaho about add the words, the moment that you add the words to the Idaho statutes, you're going to put in jeopardy all these businesses that, for whatever reason, they decide that they want to control their business in a certain way. But my bill doesn't deal with that at all. I think that's a fight as a federalist, as a person that says that certain things should be left to the states. That's a fight that I think should be left to the states. My fight is more on the federal tax exempt status that individuals, churches currently have, and I don't want that. Or other examples. I mean, another fine example, if you're attending a church-sponsored school and you want to get a grant as a student, the federal government pretty soon is going to start saying, if your school believes in traditional values, we're not going to allow your school to receive federal grants, or the students there to receive federal grants. If you look at BYU Law School right now, the ABA is trying to take their accreditation away because they don't accept practicing homosexuals in their school. There's a lot of things that are happening right now nationwide, and it's happening at a rapid pace. Something that our culture until recently did not accept, and frankly, I still don't believe that it accepts because it was 5 robed justices who made the decision. It wasn't the states that made those decisions. I think all of a sudden that cultural shift is coming, is moving on strongly, and I think we have to be very vigilant about that.
In fact, in the Daily Signal story, you're referenced as praising those states that have made those efforts in those other areas and, tangentially that are related to this.
Correct. I think you need to do it at the state level. In fact, the Supreme Court decision on gay marriage specifically said that gay marriage was legal in the United States. I disagree with the decision, but the decision also said that did not mean that the states and could not protect people from practicing their religious values. So we need to there has to be a balance between all these interests. And it seems at this time that most of the loudest voices in the culture do not want to protect religious values. And as I have said a million times, everybody needs to understand that the United States was started, was created on the premise of religious liberty. That's the first article in the First Amendment. The first sentence of the First Amendment talks about freedom of religion. And we need to understand that that's what our founding fathers were most worried about, because they escaped a society where they received religious persecution. And they wanted to create a place where all religions would be protected from government oppression.
Got about a minute left. I know we're trying to compress one other topic in here. Raul Labrador is our guest on KLIX, member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Idaho. You had a hearing yesterday dealing with, I guess, immigration officials who are a little lax in trying to move people out of the country who've committed crimes, and it got a little testy, didn't it?
It did get a little testy because you had 2 witnesses who were the victims of crimes, two beautiful mothers who had lost their children because of crimes that had been committed by people that were in the custody of the government, but they were released at some point. And you had the witness for the Democrats who pretty much was condescending to them and said, I feel sorry for you, but we shouldn't really listen to you because your story is not the story of all the people that are here in the United States. And I made it pretty clear that, as you know, I believe that we have a broken immigration system. We have a lot of problems with our immigration system. But the first value that we need to give during this process and during this debate is to the American citizen. We need an immigration system that serves the interests of Americans first, not the interests of people that are here illegally. And I think that's been one of the biggest misconceptions in this immigration debate, is that you have too many people who think that our first concern should be towards the families of the illegals. Well, I'm sorry, that's not our first concern. Our first concern is to the American citizen and what can we do to protect the American citizen. I also think we need an immigration system that is working, and we need to modernize our immigration system. But that comes after the protection of the American citizen.
I know you have some other people you have to visit with this morning, but Congressman, always good speaking with you, and we wish you well on both of these topics.
Thank you very much.
Take care, sir.
All right, you too.
Congressman Raul Labrador from northern Idaho and parts of central Idaho, of course, too, one of our two representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives from Idaho, joining us this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And the story we were referencing there at the end of the conversation was this one. This is from Stephen, I believe he pronounces it Dinan at the Washington Times. Illegal immigrants bail less than the amount it cost to bury my baby, mother testifies. Michelle Root, mother of Sarah Root, recounted her daughter's death in Omaha this year at the hands of an illegal immigrant who police said was drag racing while drunk, smashed into the young woman's car and left her brain dead. A local judge set the immigrant's bail at less than the amount it cost me to bury my baby, she said. Now, Zoe Lofgren, who's a far left-leaning liberal congresswoman from California, decided to jump in and disparage not just this woman, but as well as another parent who was there testifying yesterday. And with that, Congressman Labrador took some offense. In fact, there was even a woman by the name of Minerva Carcano, I believe is how she pronounces it. She's a bishop of the United Methodist Church, and she said using stories about children's deaths as part of a campaign to try to deport people who are here illegally amounted to blind vengeance, and Congressman Labrador was having none of that, reminding her that there were people in the hearing room yesterday, who had lost loved ones because of inaction by the U.S. government, something that we can't forget. It's funny how if you have a child who dies in a shooting at a school, and I've always used the standard for this is what happened in Newtown, Connecticut. They say that one death is too many. And that's why we have to take all of your firearms away, and we have to ensure that nobody can actually own any firearms for their own self-defense. That is the liberal argument about confiscation, is that one child's death is too many. But if you're the child of one of these people, and your death was caused by a protected liberal class, then all of a sudden that death is, well, that's irrelevant. That's how it works with all of these people. Jeremy Daly is coming up with us in just a few minutes on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you as well this morning. I do want to point out the Teacher of the Year Award. You have until midnight, April 24th, and that's just a couple of days away, to nominate your favorite teachers and tell us why you believe your teacher deserves to be recognized as our Teacher of the Year. The winning teacher will be awarded a computer, and we will give their school a $500 cash donation. Brought to you by Wendell Tire Factory. Always the right tire, always the right price. Trust what you love to Wendell Tire Factory. Of course, you can check out all the details on this at our website, newsradio1310.com. And our other, call them community, town square community websites. We do have 4 radio stations under the roof here, and that means 3 other websites. Also, I want to remind you about our friends at Mount Harrison Audiology, located in Rupert, Idaho. And I tell you, if you're listening to this show and you'd like to keep listening to it, you got to get in touch with them to ensure that that will happen. If you're like most people, you're used to thinking of hearing as something that happens in your ears, but in fact, it's what's between your ears that counts. The brain is where sound becomes information. Your brain has to work hard to make this happen, and when the sound signals from your ears are compromised, your brain has to work even harder to fill in all the gaps. This extra effort can take its toll. Don't let your brain down. Take care of your hearing with the help of Mount Harrison Audiology. You can call the office and call Dr. Christine Pickup today at 208-312-0957. As I said, better health with Trip Family Medicine on the way in a few minutes. Jeremy Daly, physician assistant, joining us. It's allergy season. Jeremy has been seeing a lot of allergic people over the last couple of days. We've got details in just a couple of minutes.